The data center industry is moving faster than ever, and behind the scenes, some seriously smart people are making it all happen. Welcome to the Inside Data Center podcast, where we dive into the stories, insights, and innovations driving real change across the industry. From hyperscale campuses to game-changing technologies, we're talking to the people shaping the future of digital infrastructure. Whether you live and breathe data centers or just want to understand what's powering our connected world, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Inside Data Center podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by Jim Hart, co-founder and CEO of BCS. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. Back for your fifth edition. Still the highest ranked guest. I know I owe you a match ball as well. I do need to deliver that soon.
I'm taking up residency.
Exactly that. Exactly. Well, it's great to have you on, and always give your reports and obviously your own, history within the sector. Always give a great insight to what's happening in the market. So we're gonna take a bit of a deep dive into your latest resort, Data Center Truth 2026, what it takes to deliver. And I think we were just chatting about it before we came online. It's a different world to when you first came on in April 2021, which seems crazy.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But before we go into that, do you want to just give a quick introduction, just in case anyone listening hasn't listened to one of your previous episodes and doesn't know who you are?
Yeah, sure. So Jim Hart, obviously co-founder and CEO of BCS. We've now been going 10 years. We are a data center specialist consultancy in program, project and cost management, working for clients across the globe wherever they need us. And as I was saying to you earlier, we're now transitioning away from kind of just data centers, and we're looking at it as an infrastructure development, because I think that's what really needs to happen now going forward.
Yeah, and that's what we were saying about when you look back over the 5 years. It's always impossible to look back over that period of time. So much happens in this industry in a month, let alone in 5 years. But one of the key factors is that switch, isn't it, from a data center to total infrastructure. We are a utility now, whether people admit it or not. That is what we are, and that's where this industry is moving as we progress over the next few years.
Absolutely. And I think one of the interesting aspects about it is the fact that we are this fourth utility, but still the public have a lack of understanding what data centers are and what they provide. I mean, essentially it's the heartbeat of everything that we do. Society, the general welfare, it just does not operate without data centers. And if you look at what actually data centers provide, getting away from the general day-to-day stuff, but it's provided probably more for inequality and leveling up than any government policy ever. It gives access to healthcare, it gives access to education, it gives access to finances, it gives access to public services. And there's no boundaries around it. Everybody has that access, and that's all being done by data centers, but we just do not advertise it enough. And there's a load of bad press out there at this moment in time, which we're just not addressing. And we just need to get out there and really make the public understand what it is a data center provides, what it does for them, and why it's so important going forward.
Yeah, the PR aspect is definitely a big shift that's needed. I think there is much more work going on when you look back over 5 years. There's a lot more now, isn't there, than there was at that time. People do talk about it now. People do talk about the impact, but I'm completely with you. It needs more of a unified voice around the impact the industry's having and what that means for the consumer.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that we have to face is the fact that if you look at demand is not an issue. You look at the pipelines, you look at your blogs, your posts, you're highlighting the fact that this demand seems to be unending and it's exponentially growing. But if you look at the facts and the figures behind that, we're just not getting enough people into the industry to absolutely execute that demand in terms of delivery. And again, if you look at the statistics out there, so I was reading the other day that if we project forward, we need something like 2.8 million full-time equivalents in the data center industry to deliver what is known in the pipeline. And that's stripping out the fluffy stuff, the superfluous stuff, the headline grabbing stuff. This is just the day-to-day business as usual delivery pipeline. If we look at the trajectory that we're going on in terms of people coming into the industry at this moment in time, we're only going to hit about 2.2 million. So it's a deficit of 600,000 full-time equivalents. So we've absolutely got to start thinking about how we're going to address it differently, how we're going to deliver differently, how we're going to execute differently. Now, obviously, we've got the issue around kind of power, which is absolutely a bottleneck. But I think people are now starting to come to the realization and understanding that capacity to deliver is also a critical factor. And that is something that we need to get hold of and address very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I know you touched on it in your report, and obviously skills is an area that I'd like to think I've got a fairly good insight to when it comes to the industry. But I think some of the stats I've got written here, like 95% expect the supply of skilled professionals to fall while demand rises. And I think when I think about the time, that's what I see most. I think we've seen that demand, that insatiable demand, just continue and continue. And we'll talk about this as well, about whether the announcements actually match what's delivered is again especially. But there's no doubt there is significant demand. But equally, there hasn't really been that investment into developing the skills that are needed for that demand. And I also think, in fairness to the sector, what's happened is it's grown so quickly. You have to deal with what's happening today. You can't build a talent pipeline overnight. That does take a long time, and that the industry's balancing that between what we need today and what we need for the future, and it's a difficult scenario to be in.
But I think one of the things we can do to help ourselves, which historically we've been absolutely poor at, is start bringing people in from different industries, adjacent industries, power-hungry industries, transferable skills. Now, I've been asked on numerous occasions by various clients, bring somebody in, fresh thinking, fresh approach, let's do something different. As soon as I put these people in front of clients, the first thing they say is, yeah, but they don't do data centers, do they? We've got to get away from that. And again, it comes back to the point that we're no longer delivering just data centers. It's an infrastructure approach. And therefore, we have to approach it in that manner. We can't just do the same things again and again and expect a different result. I mean, I think that's Einstein's definition of insanity. So we've absolutely, as an industry, got to bite the bullet. We've got to embrace the change that's coming, because there's been more change probably in the last 5 years than the entirety of my career before that, previous 20 odd years. And that change is only increasing. So unless we start embracing it, unless we start actually taking that on board, we're just going to stagnate and things will fail.
Yeah, definitely. And you are seeing more talent come in from other industries now, and you touched on it there. A lot of that is due to the switch towards the power side, where some, not everybody, but some have understood that the skills they need for that are not within the industry, and people are starting to look outside it. Whether it's out of necessity or strategy, we could debate, I think, for a while. But You definitely are seeing more people come into the industry now.
Absolutely. I think there's got to be a fundamental shift in terms of how we view data centers, in terms of the end output. And my belief is actually we should take a cue from the manufacturing side, automation side, and look at the data center as a product, and then start delivering it as such. And we've got to do more with less. So we've got to look at automation. We've got to look at AI and the way that can be used properly to help us, and not just all the buzz that's going around it and the hype that's going around it. Absolutely understand what can take us forward, what can help us, and start utilizing that to its fullest extent. But I still maintain the fact is that we've got to change the delivery model. I mean, at a time where we have a skills shortage, we see some of the big players bringing back construction management, which we know is resource intensive. For me, and we've got to have closer collaboration. We've got to have longer term frameworks, agreements, whatever you will. And I say, by looking at it as a product and treating it in that manner and treating the relationships in that manner, you'll go some way towards that.
Yeah, and I think another stat that I pulled out was 9% reported lost orders and 50% reported missed deadlines as a direct result of skill shortages, which aligns with that. When it's like, and I guess that's the whole sort of thought process behind this report, isn't it? How do you execute? How do you deliver in a modern world when you've got this demand, you've got skills challenges, you've got multiple other challenges as well? Like, how can we deliver to the customer's demand in the time period that's required whilst balancing all these challenges that we're facing?
So, I mean, if you look at the current bottlenecks that exist, and they can basically break down into kind of 6 kind of categories. And it's also the noise that's going around at the moment. We're distracted. You mentioned earlier on about all the announcements and what's real and what's not real. And that's actually a distraction. And again, that comes into these 6 categories of what's causing, or the root cause of these delays, these issues. So obviously we've got a power issue. That's no two ways about it. If you look across the continent, you've got anywhere between 8 and 12 years in some locations stretching out before you're even going to get power to a site. I mean, you can get design up and running, you can get the brief up and running, you can get the site shovel ready, but if you've got no power, then it's just a shell. It's just a waste of time. You've got the issues around planning and permitting. So you've got various legislative changes that's not necessarily reflected in the planning and permitting processes at this moment in time. So if you take the UK, for example, we've had a number of announcements recently where some major projects have been turned down in planning, even though it's gone through the new process. And the reason being is that the government there has put a solution in place, but not necessarily the process to deliver the solution. So what they've done is they accelerated planning, but mentioned nothing about any of the reporting targets that's associated with that. So again, we've got to be a bit cuter in terms of how this legislation comes in, because we're just getting bound up in all this red tape. I think the other issue as well is that capital is probably more selective now. So if you go back pre-2022, when low interest rates were about 3%, and the calculus has now changed, where projects then were viable. You've got projects now, the 6 to 7% funding, that perhaps are on the margins and may not be that attractive. But I also think that's also going to be exacerbated by what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, because if you look at where a lot of this capital comes from in terms of going into the funds, that's now going to be diverted into reparations in the Middle East. You've also got, I think, a slight issue with kind of the hyperscales announcements. They're big, they're lumpy, but they're opaque. So they issue these massive capacity commitments across various locations, but there's no actual timing behind them. So planning for them is incredibly difficult. So we don't know when they need that capacity. We don't know where the geography is. And, the specification we're seeing is shifting almost monthly in terms of those technical demands that are coming in. But you've also got to remember is that we have speculative announcements going out all the time, but this probably serves a commercial purpose more than anything else, and it's beyond just the building. It's probably signalling to the market that they've got a land bank. It's signalling to hyperscalers that they're ready to go. It's probably signaling that to funders that actually they've got something assembled and trying to attract an attractive funding arrangement. So there's all those issues that go along as well.
Yeah, and I think from one point you picked there, from the announcements and the scale, and whether that's from a developer announcing they're going to develop in a region, or a hyperscaler announcing they're going to invest X in a region, I think a lot of that has become PR, hasn't it? It has become advertising. Basically, what they're trying to do is either attract a customer or get their message to the local region that they're doing good for the area. The investment is not just a data center, it's also X million in skills or whatever it might be. And I think because the PR and the publicity of the industry has become much broader, much more public, it's now getting that attraction in the correct media, the well-viewed media. People are using it, and why not? But that is what a lot of that is.
No, absolutely. But it's creating a fog, if you like. So what's real, what's not real? Where should we be concentrating, and where we're just chasing, smoke and mirrors? So we again, it comes to this collaboration piece. So share the pipelines, share the locations. I get some of the fact that some of it will be commercially sensitive, but I've been signing NDAs for as long as I remember. Back in the day, there used to be personal NDAs where my family would be taken off me, even if I talked about where I was working, let alone who for. But there are mechanisms you can put around it. But there's trust that has to come into the industry where we share these pipelines. We've got to recognise that we've got finite resource to develop it and deliver it. So therefore, let's just be a little bit more clever in terms of how we go about it, and how we can all work together to deliver this infrastructure that is absolutely critical to society's functioning.
Yeah, and it's not always good PR either. It's not great for us to be seeing gigawatt after gigawatt, billions after billions announced, and it attracts the wrong attention as well as the attention they're seeking. So yeah, the industry definitely needs to think about it a bit more and understand the impact it can have on the wider audience.
Yeah, and I get the fact that the billions make the headline figures, but it's the benefits that we should be going on about. It's the benefits we should be advertising. It's the benefits that we should be underlining. And it just comes down to a binary. We're investing 5 billion here, 2 billion there. We're putting 2 gigawatts there. And it distorts the view of the public. So, I was at a school careers fair, and I had a 14-year-old haranguing me on water usage in data centers. 14-year-old. Now, I had to explain the difference between evaporative cooling and closed loop cooling and the fact that we're using this technology now. I also had to explain the fact that, data centers were not in the top 10 water usage industries. That golf courses use more water than data centers. Probably the clothes on his back use more water than data centers. You have the House of Lords debating this, but they're debating stuff on 5-year-old, 10-year-old technology. They're not debating it on what we're doing now and how the industry is moving forward. And again, that's a PR issue. We really need to push out there the fact that I think of all the energy intensive industries, we are pioneering energy efficiency, renewables, green energy. We're really, really going through this. And look, I'll hold my hands up. It's not through any desire to save the planet. It is basically put in commercial reasons. But if that commercial reasons are driving that change, then great, fantastic. Let's have more of it.
Yeah, definitely. Excuse me. And another point that I think is quite pertinent today is supply chain. We are experiencing supply chain challenges ourselves right now, particularly with fueling our vehicles. But 53% say supply chain disruption will directly influence future site selection. And I'm sure those numbers might be slightly different, as I say, with what's happening in the world today. But do you want to go into a bit more detail around that? Because I think supply chains, it has had an impact across the years, isn't it? But it's always been different aspects of the supply chain that are causing the challenges in any particular time.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, if we go back to kind of pre-22, whereby it's very much commoditized, it's a procurement issue. But then post-COVID, it probably hit data centers harder than most because, simultaneously you're experiencing increase in demand not only through cloud acceleration, but also through the burgeoning AI. So you've got this perfect storm there and then, but you're also competing for the same transformers, the same switchgear, the same electrical components as the energy transition people, the grid modernization, EV charging, renewable generation, battery storage. We're all drawing from the same supply chain. And that's really impacted us since 2022. And I think it's now becoming a primary differentiator, to your point earlier on, that a site that has a pre-assembled supply chain, that has power coming in, that has a contractor that can deliver lined up and ready to go. Because the hyperscalers are now more intelligent. They're going beyond the balance sheet. They're going beyond, just the headline numbers and looking at your track record in delivery, how you deliver, where you've delivered, and whether you're on time or not. And again, you've got to put this into perspective. So if you have an A100 processor idle, that's $2 to $3 per hour lost compute revenue. Now, you look at the amount of processors that are going into these things, it doesn't take much to add up really, really quickly. So it's not necessarily the cheapest, but if you can hit a deadline, you can deliver on time, and you can get that product up and running and into the marketplace, gaining revenue quicker than anybody else, then you will have a head start. You will be in pole position.
Yeah, and have you seen, and I know I have more collaboration as well for that, so you're getting these collaborative, whether it's a joint venture or similar, where the developer is doing a joint venture with, let's say, a general contractor, or they're doing it with a designer, whatever it might be, but they're working together on the project, so the customers are pointing it as a JV rather than a selective sort of process.
So what we've experienced, actually, it's probably happened by default, is that most of our clients probably have 2, maybe 3 key suppliers in any strata. So they have ready-made supply chains to go, and that's right from the client through to the consultants, through to the contractors, through to the big equipment suppliers. But what that does is it creates those relationships. It creates that familiarity in terms of knowing what that client's product is, how that's delivered, where it's delivered. But it gives certainty because you've worked together, because you understand each other, you understand each other's drivers, you're going in the same direction. There's going to have to be more than that, more of that. And we've seen it again, if you look at the hyperscalers in terms of what they're doing, going all through the supply chain. And if you go take equipment, for example, and this goes back to the point, is certainty, is supply chain a differentiator? They have massive OF and CI programs now where they're buying the big kit and free issuing it to the contractors. So that underlines the importance they're putting on that equipment coming in on time. And it comes back to the earlier point where we've got to start thinking about things differently. We've got to have this collaboration. We've got to have this openness. Move away. I mean, I have an issue with kind of these developers and client side procurement models, for example, on consultants. You need your consultant totally focused on what they're delivering for you. So for me, you should procure an output, and it comes back to where have you delivered, can you deliver, how you deliver. But they are absolutely, in my experience, driven by the fact that they get a spot bonus for knocking a percentage off a fee, for example. Now, how is taking 10, 20, 30,000 pound off a consultant's fee on £1 billion development going to make a blind bit of difference to the overall investment? Actually, it's probably going to cost you more in the long run because commercially you put that consultant into a back foot position where they're going to need to regain margin. So again, let's look at it as a product. Let's look at it as an output and deliver to that, and then absolutely model the delivery from beginning to end around that.
Yeah, and I can't let you go without talking about geography as well, because I know you cover such a broad area, and I'm sure the same question you get asked is the same question that I get asked. Where's busy at the moment, Andy? And I always say everywhere's busy, but busy doing different things. So just wonder what your I know it touched on it in the report as well. There are a few areas where you look at the geography and the impact in different areas, but what are you seeing across your regions at present?
The tier 2 countries are absolutely starting to come into the fore now. The flat D, the tier 1 countries, it's well documented the issues they're having with grid and power. You look at Italy, Spain is actually, after a lot of noise for the last 5 years, is starting to gain traction now as things happening there. The Nordics absolutely start to charge away now, and it's an interesting take there. Certainly with people like Bulk that again go for this pre-assembled supply chain, a lot of design for manufacturer and manufacture off-site, which again I think is something from the manufacturing automation industries which we should be taking note of. Central and Eastern Europe, actually, we're advising the Bulgarian government at the moment, of all people. We got a phone call out of the blue, but that's starting again to gain a bit of traction on a smaller scale. But I think that the key one for us, and it's probably a slower burn at the minute, is probably Africa. Now, it's a very different market in that there's no linear development. They leapfrog. And it's fantastic to see, trying to keep abreast of it and hold of it and the thought process behind it. You just have to empty your mind and go with it. But I think over the next 5 years, that's certainly going to be a place to be. We've just opened in South Africa. We believe it's a place for a first mover. But you look at the will there, they need help. And interestingly, we reached out to the British government. We went over to Zambia to meet with 25 different countries and ministries. All said they needed help. We reached out to the British government saying, actually, this is something as world leaders in what we do in the UK, not just our firm, but generally in the UK, we are world leaders in what we do. It's something that we can help. It's very little investment from a government point of view, but it will create massive influence, soft influence, across Africa. Heard absolutely nothing. I've chased them up 2 or 3 times, absolutely nothing. But we've got the German government, we've got the EU saying, actually, you know what, this sounds like a really great idea. It beggars belief. You've got something here that's not going to cost them any money. It's just a little bit of shoulder behind the wheel to make those connections, and they're just not helping.
I can't say I'm surprised, but if anyone is listening that has influence,
please
give Jim a call. I'll leave or message me and I'll give you Jim's number. I'm sure he'll be happy for me to pass it on. But and finally, before I let you go, I was just say we'll add the report into the show notes. Everyone go and take a look. There's some really, really good data in there, and it just shows you where the industry is right now. And I think that's always really important. That's why your reports are so good, because they're so frequent. It's kind of up to date. But I've had this sort of quandary for a while. But do you think we'll hit a point where we simply can't execute the demand that's there? Because whether it's because of skills, whether it's because of power, but there comes a point where we kind of hit a ceiling, and we're building as much as we can build, and the demand could continue, but it's just going to kind of add up and up. Or do you think that the industry will adapt, it will evolve, we'll find different solutions, which the industry is brilliant at, and we'll continue on this path for the foreseeable future?
It's a head and heart thing, isn't it? My heart tells me, yes, all the points you made there, it's a brilliant industry, we will adapt. But if you look at the volume that's coming down, then my head is saying, we have to change. We have to do something different. We have to look at different technologies, different ways of doing things. I think there will be an inflection point, inevitably. Again, I go back to the rate of change in technology, the densities that are coming through. We haven't even started thinking about the impact of quantum computing, and that coming through on the system yet. So we have to do something. We have to change. We can't bury our heads in the sand and carry on as we are. I do believe that there's a will out there. There's a sea change happening. The question and the challenge I think that we're facing is it quick enough? Is it fast enough? And actually, are we prepared to take it on? I hope so.
Definitely. And I think if you look at even if you simply look at the process, the construction process, let's take the delivery process, and you look at all this new technology that's coming in, you follow seed funding. If you're a geek like me and you look at things like that, there's so much more technology that's coming in, that's receiving funding, that could have quite a dramatic impact on how we construct, how we build, and the process. It's whether that is adopted, isn't it? It's whether that technology kind of breaks through and is adopted into the construction process.
No, absolutely. And you take something like commissioning, right? We have an absolute dearth of commission engineers. It's not built into the construction process. It's thought about too late. It's one of those things that's perennially squeezed. But the technology that we have these days, we can actually now embed it from day one. So we can free up these commission engineers to use their expertise where it's most focused. It will take some of the pressure off the kind of more mundane tasks, free up their time. So again, we can do more for less. And you can go through the entire supply chain and apply those analogies and do that. I think part of the issue is that you've got so many tools out there now because of this big, massive burst. It's actually getting the right one that's going to do what you want it to do. And I think if we're not careful, we adapt to the tool rather than picking a tool to what we want to do. which is not necessarily a good thing. So we've got to take that into account. But we've also got to look at prefabrication. We've got to look at utilising that. Here in the UK, you're limited by, a 14 by 44 foot container. We've got to look at different ways of doing that. So if you look at some of these big campus developments, actually, for short-term pain, setting up a manufacturing facility on site, that becomes the last data center, if you like. But you're manufacturing on site. You can have bigger modules, take them into 1, 2, and 3. That's something I think we should be looking at, absolutely. But again, you can only do that if you've got the volume there to do it, and you can only look at that if you understand the pipelines that are coming through and they're predictable, and you know where they're going to be delivered.
A lot to do then, Jim. That's kind of where we'll leave this one. I think I'll finish on, like as I say, I was looking back at our podcast episodes in 5 years, nearly to the day, which is crazy. But I think so much great stuff's happened. The industry's done so much good in that period, and it's continuing on that path. It's just a case of, can we continue on that path at the same time as this demand that we just can't, like you say, we can't even measure the demand. We can't tell you how much demand's coming because it's just impossible right now. So it's how do we continue on that path is a question.
Absolutely. And I've been lucky enough to work across many sectors, but this sector is brilliant. It's the most exciting. It's the most diverse. It gives you the greatest opportunity. The challenges it throws up to keep you interested, to keep you going, are just fantastic. So I genuinely believe with the people we have coming into the industry, the people we've got in the industry, there will be new ways of thinking. There will be new different ways of doing it. We will come up with an answer. Will we make mistakes in the meantime? I think so. But that's how we learn, isn't it? But we shouldn't be afraid to do that. We shouldn't be afraid to grasp the nettle and try something different.
100%. Best industry in the world, as I always say. I'll add the report in the show notes. So if anyone wants to grab the report, please take a look there. But if anyone wants to get hold of you, Jim, what's the best way to get hold of you? Just drop me a line at james.hart@bcsconsultancy.com, and I'll get back to you. No problem at all. And we'll do it again soon. I'll deliver the matchable soon. I promise. I'm going to get a date in your diary. But, we've just put the questions together for the next report. It's about to go out. New podcast coming soon. Exactly, yeah. All right, Jim, good to catch up. Thanks for your time. That's it for this episode of the Inside Data Center podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This show is brought to you by DataX and Data Exec, the recruitment partners powering global talent across the data center and digital infrastructure world. If you enjoyed today's conversations, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast community. Stay tuned for more stories, insights, and conversations with the people shaping the future of our industry.